Greetings and welcome to 24 Hours Have Passed, the Summit Preview 2016. We're excited you could join us today for Peter Meyer's session, Developing a SQL Server 2016 Master Data Services Solution. This 24 Hours Have Passed event consists of 24 consecutive live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. The sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. To access any on-demand sessions, please visit www.24hoursofpass.com for all session links. My name is Rick Haggis. I'm a Data Platform MVP and Solutions Architect with DBBest, and I'm glad to be here with Peter Myers, who I've done this 24 Hours Pass bit with before. I have a few introductory slides before we hand it over to Peter, though. Next slide, please. So if you require technical assistance, please type your question into the question pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask any questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I will read your question aloud to the speaker. You are able to zoom in on the presentation content by using the Zoom button located on top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment to complete it. It will appear in your web browser. Next slide, please. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsors, Microsoft, Idera, and Attunity. In addition, I'd also like to thank the supporting sponsors for this event, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and SQL Sentry. SQL Sentry enables data professionals to monitor, diagnose, and optimize server performance across physical, virtual, and cloud environments. The staging of this 24 Hours Have Passed would not be possible without their generous support, and they are the reason this event is available free of charge. Next, please. Make sure you are exploring everything has to offer for the data professional. You can join local user groups around the world, special interest groups, find free online resources through our Learning Center, and read up on the latest community news in the Connector newsletter. Next. And next, I'd like to bring to your attention the upcoming PASS Summit, taking place in Seattle, Washington from October 25th to the 28th. PASS Summit 2016 features over 200 sessions with world-class data experts like Peter Myers. It's a perfect place to network with experts and peers. You can meet with the Microsoft engineering team behind SQL Server 2016 and, of course, the Azure cloud. You can save $200 on registration by using the exclusive discount code 24HOP200 before the end of Sunday, September 18th. So hurry now and register. To find out more, please visit www.passsummit.com. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to introduce you today, today's presenter, Peter Myers. Peter is an independent BI expert for Bitwise Solutions and is a Microsoft certified solutions expert in SQL Server and has been a data platform MVP since 2007. Peter has experience in designing, developing, and maintaining Microsoft database and application solutions since 1997, so he's an old man. His focus is on consulting, educating, and mentoring. And without further ado, here is Peter with developing a SQL Server 2016 Master Data Services Solution. Peter?
Rick, thank you very much for the introduction, and very happy to be here and in support of the upcoming summit in Seattle in November, or in October. I chose this topic because Master Data Services is one of my favorite BI-related services delivered with SQL Server. It's also a disappointing statistic that when I present, for example, this week at a Microsoft event here in my home city of Melbourne, and when I asked an audience of maybe 100 people, how many were using data services or master data services, I was somewhat shocked to see that there were about 5 hands that were raised. When I next asked, well, who is aware of what master data services can achieve for you, majority of hands were in agreement that they were unaware of what this service could contribute. So really, that's what this session's about. It's about introducing the problem that master data services is there to solve. And I'll introduce very quickly the discipline of master data management that leads beautifully into a discussion, an introduction to SQL Server master data services, and then end to end, it is my intention to develop a fundamental solution so that you have an awareness of how you can develop, deploy, and maintain the life cycles of a master data services solution. Let's begin then with introducing what is master data management. And I've gone and snatched this definition from Wikipedia, and I'm going to read it straight out. That master data management comprises a set of processes, governance policies, standards, and tools that consistently defines and manages the master data, non-transactional data entities you have, of your organization. It's really, in essence, about taking control of your data and making it work to your advantage. And so a successful MDM solution should deliver a master data hub that provides access to authoritative, standardized, and validated versions of data. And we can think of it in terms of the problems that it's designed to address. And it's a common one that organizations have a lack of authoritative source data. And this leads to reports that perhaps aren't trusted, or if they are trusted, it leads to some incredibly poor decision making. It could be that you have systems that have different versions of the same data, and there's conflicts within the organization, and how would you merge and unify that set? It also occurs when data spreads across multiple systems that lack integrity and consistency. Even through mergers and acquisitions, you'll find that the inheritance of data systems and customer databases and geographic definitions tend to collide. Multiple stakeholders for the same record, who has control, who wins if updates take place at the same time. When it comes to delivering data models, for example, analysis services cubes and tabular databases, there may be a lack of formal dimension maintenance on what gets delivered as a dimension and how the hierarchies are structured. And then the inability to enable and monitor and enforce data management processes. And so what I'm about to introduce to you as master data services delivered with SQL Server has been designed to address and provide solutions to those challenges. In context, master data services sits within a family of related services that we refer to as the Enterprise Information Management Suite, often shortened to EIM. And you may be familiar with integration services, primarily designed to implement ETL processes. Today in demonstration, you'll see how it works beautifully with master data services. Master data services, about managing reliable and centralized lists of data, and also broadens the reach of master data management to those using Excel or the web application master data manager. The third service in the EIM suite is data quality services, and it's about knowledge-driven data cleansing processes. And these have all been designed to deliver what I refer to as the 4 C's of complete, clean, consistent, and current data. And with the spotlight in this 1-hour session on master data services, the consistency is what's truly being delivered from an MDS solution. A little bit of history. Master Data Services was first delivered with SQL Server in 2008 R2. What we see in the more recent release with SQL Server 2016 is the 4th release. And while the prior 2 releases with 2012 and 2014 didn't include many new capabilities and features, certainly SQL Server 2016 stands out as a release that has delivered huge new capabilities and features. It is in fact a topic that I'll be presenting at the PASS Summit in October. So as a service, it's designed intentionally to deliver credible, consistent data with a user-centric data governance, and it's supported in SQL Server 2016 only in the Enterprise and the Developer editions. Notably, if you're on SQL Server 2012 or 2014, Master Data Services is also available with the BI edition. The BI edition is no longer available in SQL Server 2016. Architecturally, when you install it, the prereq is that you have SQL Server Database Engine, because the metadata repository will be a SQL Server database. Another prerequisite for the service itself is Internet Information Services, otherwise known as IIS. It will install a WCF data service and also a web application, which is one of the 2 Microsoft-provided user interfaces. The second interface, by the way, is the Excel add-in, and we'll explore all of these in demonstration in this session. The Master Data Management web application requires Silverlight, so it's only going to work in Internet Explorer, but it provides a rich set of capabilities and features for both working with master data and also the administration about maintaining permissions, integration, version management of your master data services models. The Excel add-in, which for Master Data Services 2016 is supported for Excel 2010 and later. It supports the ability to connect to the Master Data Services instance and to browse, manage the master data, even create entities and manage their properties, as I'm about to demonstrate. So let's put this into some context, that as a sample implementation here, and there are many ways that you could implement master data services. But the traditional approach in data warehousing when it comes to populating dimension tables that describe your business entities is to go straight to the source system or perhaps via some staging mechanism and then load the data into the data warehouse. Well, we'd propose that this isn't necessarily the best approach. You could install master data services. You could use your source system to initialize some entities within a master data services model, and then you could maintain this as a set of master data. All sorts of capabilities with permission management, version management, business rules to enforce your requirements for the quality of your data. And this could be managed within Master Data Manager, the web application, or with Excel. There can also be notifications that could push out when business rules are broken, and I'll demonstrate this for you in this session. And then you could adapt your integration services packages to source their clean, consistent, authoritative data direct from master data services. This is just one of many architectures or implementations of master data services. With that introduction and some background, let's move into the end-to-end life cycle of designing, delivering, deploying, and maintaining a master data services solution. And starting with the very high-level object of the model itself, it's akin to the database in SQL Server. And a model contains entities, and entities contain attributes. And these entities will typically describe what's relevant to you on your business, whether it's products, whether it's people, whether it's places, whether it's concepts. And you have this need to define and maintain them as master lists. Let's note that each entity has 2 attributes that must be included. They are the code and the name attributes. And we have many similarities then, that attributes are like columns of a relational table, and I'm going to introduce them to you here in the first demonstration. So developing a master data solution with master data services, let me give you some detail about the scenario. I'm going to work with some geography data, and presently I do not have a master data services solution, but I do have a need to manage my geographic and sales territory data, and also a need to enhance this with New Zealand data. One of my favorite data sets is, of course, the AdventureWorks samples, and for whatever reason, New Zealand was just never considered to be a country that selling bicycles was of interest. Well, we're going to address that through setting up some geographic entities in master data services and then adding in some New Zealand data. So let me begin the demonstration by showing you that I have an analysis services multidimensional project, and I've opened up a couple of the dimension designers. What you see here first is the reseller dimension, and the reseller dimension has a hierarchy named geography. And inside the geography hierarchy, I can show you that presently we have these 6 countries. There is no New Zealand yet loaded into the cube. And for the salesperson, I have a salespeople hierarchy, and when we look at the sales territories in Pacific, we only have Australia. And upon a successful implementation through a series of demonstrations, I'll come back to these dimensions at the end, and we'll refresh, and we should see the master data flowing right through to the analytic layer delivered through Analysis Services Cube. the starting point then is wearing the hat of an administrator. I'm using Master Data Manager and System Administration to create a new model. And recall that a model is like a top-level object and container. It's like a relational database. And I'm going to name this the AdventureWorks BI model, and I'm going to turn off the option that will also create the very first entity. So what I'm creating is really an empty model. Now, when I switch back to the home page of Master Data Manager, we can now see here at top that the model is in focus and it's version 1. And we'll talk about versioning and the life cycle of versions a little later in this session. Now I'm going to switch to Excel, and I have a workbook here that has some data preloaded. In fact, I have these 3 worksheets along the bottom that provide data loaded from the AdventureWorks sample database for country, region, state, province, and also for city. Now, before I can do anything with Master Data Services, I will need to download and install the Master Data Services add-in. This is a free install. Of course, it will require that you have a license for SQL Server to have installed Master Data Services. And the very first command on the ribbon enables me to connect to a Master Data Services instance. So let me enter the server address, and of course this will require permissions, of which I have administrative rights, but you can delegate appropriate permissions to the right people, whether it's to maintain or simply read-only master data. Here I am connecting to my AdventureWorks BI model, which of course is empty. So step 1, having created the model, is to move into creating some entities. And the first entity I will create based on this range of data defining 7 countries. Note that row 7 is including New Zealand. So this very simple interface allows me to select a range of data and then to define which model and version, and then provide the details for the entity. So this will be named country, region. The code is mandatory, so a column containing unique values must be chosen for the code. So you'll note here that column A has the unique 2-character codes. The name is a required attribute, but it's optional. You do not have to load values in, but I will choose to assign the English country region name into the name. Now when I click OK, it's communicating with the service, it's defining the entities in terms of all of the 4 attributes that are the columns of this table, and then it's uploading the data to create a master list of country regions. What you now see then is an additional worksheet has been added to the workbook, which is in fact a master list query. And we see that the first column provides the name values, the second column is my code, and then columns P and Q are additional user-defined attributes, in this case translations to French and Spanish. Now what I can do is come to the attribute properties, and I can define that the maximum length for the text for this attribute is 50. And I'm going to repeat that also for the Spanish country region name. And there we have it. Within a matter of a minute, I've created an entity and defined the attributes. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete that sheet from the workbook. In recognition that I actually haven't deleted the master data, what I did was delete a response or a query coming from Master Data Services. I now switch to the second worksheet, which contains data describing state provinces within countries. And I'm going to go through the same process of defining now a second entity named state province. Its code will be the state province ID, the values you see there in column A, and the state province name will be used for the name attribute. The remaining 3 attributes will be defined as user-defined. And again, it creates the entity in terms of those attributes, it loads the master data, and then it returns to us the master list. Now, when I take a look at the first state here of New South Wales in Australia, what concerns me is that the values here for country region code could be changed to anything, even a non-existent country. So what I will do is modify the attribute properties to describe that this attribute is in fact a constrained list. that you must choose an existing country as defined in the country region entity. So this is the equivalent of what we have with foreign keys in relational database designs. You'll now see that there's a drop-down list here supporting only the selection of existing country regions to be assigned to a state. Now, as one very minor new feature in 2016, here in the settings, I can determine which display format. So presently you see code and name within braces, and I've defined that for this session, I only would like to see just the code. Next, attribute properties for the state province code. I know that this should not exceed 3 characters, so I update it. And then lastly, for the sales territory region, we'll see from the list itself, the sales territory regions are perhaps 10. I'm going to use the attribute properties to create a new entity named sales territory region. And so what this will do is take the distinct values found within this attribute, and it's going to create a new entity based on those distinct values. And now you'll see that you must choose from an existing sales territory region. And let me just point out to you in the Explorer, I now have 3 entities defined in the model. Let me go ahead and delete that worksheet also, and then create the last entity, the city entity. And so I'll work through the same process of adding a new entity named city. In this case, I do not have a unique value column, so I have the option to have master data services generate the code automatically. So this is the equivalent of an identity column in a SQL Server table. All right, so now that I've defined the city entity, it's created it, it's loaded back the results, and so I'll complete the configuration by updating the attribute properties for state province so that it is constrained by the selection of state province members. The postal code I know should not exceed 15 characters, and likewise the IP address locator. Each city at AdventureWorks apparently has a unique IP address assigned to it. It should be no longer than 15 characters. There it is, the creation of a model for entities. What I now do is from the ribbon command, I'm going to apply a filter to the city because I'm now interested in focusing on New Zealand cities. So I'm going to add a filter by state province that asks to retrieve the cities only where the state province is New Zealand. And then what we learn is that there are no cities for New Zealand at this stage. So this can be addressed by using Excel as one approach. I'm going to enter Auckland as a new city. I do not need to enter a code because it's automatically generated for this entity. I will choose from the existing state provinces the New Zealand. I know that its postal code is 1010, and the IP address that we assign to it is this. Having entered those details on the master data ribbon, I can then publish those changes. And there it is. So I've now added some master data. And I'm now going to switch across to Master Data Manager and show you that there's an alternative experience for exploring and managing master data here through this Silverlight experience in Master Data Manager. So here I can toggle between the 4 entities within my model. Let's take a look at state province, because I've noticed when I navigate to page 2 that the US state of Washington has an incorrect sales territory region. It has been misassigned to the northeast when in fact it should be the northwest. So here I am making an update to master data. I click OK and that updates immediately. And then we can demonstrate here the history and show you how it's being tracked and logged by who and when, and we can keep track of all of these details, which is important both from an auditing perspective, but also at times we want to manage changes and slow changes across our dimensions, and we can keep a rich history even here in the master data repository. Let me now switch to the city entity, and then I could apply a filter. Let's take a look at where state province is equal to New Zealand. And then apply that filter to find that we have the one city of Auckland. Well, let me add a city using this interface, and the second city will be the city of Wellington. With a postcode of 6011 and this IP address. And now we have two cities for this, the country of New Zealand. To wrap up this demo, here I am in SQL Server Management Studio, and everything that takes place for an instance of master data services is stored in the master data repository. I've named it MDS, and I'm going to expand the tables and show you there's lots of metadata, and in fact anything you find in the MDM schema, you can read it, but you shouldn't do much more with it. What I will do is filter the tables where the schema is equal to STG, which is an abbreviation for staging. And what you'll find is that each of our entities has a staging table, and later we're going to show how you can manage and bulk manage master data by loading new or changed members into these staging tables and then programmatically managing them through to the service. All right, so that brings me to the end of the first demonstration. I've gone ahead and created a model for entities, managed the master data, and provided you a preview of how staging might work. Hey Rick, are there any questions at this stage that I might need to address?
Not this time. Everything's going well.
All right, so the next phase would be, well, how could we enhance this model? And the two topics are business rules and hierarchies. And so essentially business rules are there to allow you to enforce integrity. They can use an if-then structure, so under a certain condition something should be performed. They can even launch external workflows. They can notify users when rules are violated. And a new feature in SQL Server 2016 is they can be extended with SQL Server functions and stored procedures to provide you customized logic. The other approach we can take when enhancing a model is to define hierarchies. There are two types. There are the derived hierarchies and explicit hierarchies. And the explicit hierarchies, by the way, are being deprecated, which means they're still available to us in SQL Server 2016, but at some future release they'll be removed. The derived hierarchies then have been enhanced in SQL Server 2016, and they now support the ability to have levels that are many-to-many relationships. So let's move to the second demonstration where I'll take the existing model and enhance them with business rules and with hierarchies. All right, so business rules are defined by using Master Data Manager. So I return to the home page, and under the System Administration, I manage business rules. Business rules are defined at entity level, so I'm going to define two for the city. The first rule is going to ensure that valid values are provided. By default, you do not need to provide a value except for the code attribute. All other attributes don't mind if they have a missing value. Well, I'll create a rule to ensure that valid values are provided for all other attributes. The second rule, you'll note we have an IP address for the city. I want to ensure that while it's a text value, that it adheres to the valid form for an IP address. So let's start by creating the first rule, and I'm going to name this the required attributes rule. Now this is a cool capability. I would like Master Data Services to notify me if there are any violations of this rule. And I simply come down to the then, because it will apply to all, not a conditional subset. And when I click here, I'm going to specify that the name attribute the operator will be, and look, there are many operators here that allow you to set defaults or to change values under conditions, or here under the validation group, the first one is very common, that it is required. And then I click Save. And then I'm going to build up by adding in the other three. That includes state province being required. Next, it will be that the postal code is required. And lastly, that the IP address locator is required. And then I save that as a single rule. Now what's cool is that when I click on it, it expands and it shows me a description of what that rule is. Let me add a second rule, which is that I want a valid IP address. Again, I would like a notification sent to me. And this one will be that the IP address locator must contain the pattern, and then I choose attribute value. I can paste in a regular expression like this. Let me copy from my snippets file a regular expression that will validate an IP address. And now I have two rules. Now these rules don't mean much until they're published. And so I'm going to publish these rules. By the way, they're implemented as stored procedures in the Master Data Services repository. Now, I return to the home page in Master Data Manager, and now I'm going to return to Explorer. And then here for the city entity, you have a drop-down here for Apply Rules, and the first option will be for me to check the status. And what it tells me that of all of the cities, in fact I have 657 cities, they're in a state of awaiting revalidation. Since I published new rules, those rules have not yet been applied. So let's go ahead and apply the published rules to all of the cities and then return to the status. And then we can see here that, well, it did its job, but there's one that failed. It's quite easy to discover what has failed. I'm just going to create a filter based on validation status and specifically where the validation has failed. And then I apply that to learn that the city of New York, and note down here in the bottom right corner, it tells me in detail what was the rule that was broken, the valid IP address. And we can see here that the first octet should be 203. And so before I make the update, notice here that this is an invalid or a failed validation, and now when I update the value, it reapplies the rules, and we see that it now is valid. And just for good measure, let's check the status overall, and sure enough, we see that all members are now successful. Let's take a look at it from the Excel perspective. I'm going to refresh the query that I have here in Excel, and that reveals to me that I have 2 New Zealand cities. And let's go and add in a third city of Christchurch. And deliberately, I'm not going to provide a postal code or an IP address locator, and I simply publish, and what we get is a validation failed result here. And if I hover over, I get the full detail in this tooltip describing that these rules are broken and this is what needs to happen to fix it. So let me fix that up by providing the correct details. Oops, 203.0.113.151, and then I can publish, and we see that it's been published and it's passed the validation. That's the topic of business rules, the equivalence in relational databases of course, constraints and triggers. The next topic then is to take a look at hierarchies. So I'm going to demonstrate 2 types of hierarchies. Under system administration, I'm going to manage the derived hierarchies within the model, and I'm going to add a new derived hierarchy named geography that will support the navigation from country down to state down to city. All right, so the name will be geography. And then it presents to me this experience that allows me to drag and drop from the left side. So these are the entities within my model, and I start from the bottom level, which is city, and I drag and drop it to make that the very first level of the geography hierarchy. And then it prompts me to drop another entity to become the parent of city. And notice the way here that it's narrowed down and said there's only one choice that you could make, because the derived hierarchies leverage the domain-based attributes. And so there's a domain-based attribute ensuring that a city must be assigned to an existing state. And now we see that states must be assigned either to a country or to a sales territory. So I have two choices here, and I'll drag drop the country region code. And now I have a three-level derived hierarchy, which in essence is navigating across those domain-based attributes that are enforcing integrity. Here in the preview, we can see then for the country Australia, in my home state of Victoria, that there are these Victorian cities. In New Zealand, by the way, New Zealand doesn't have states, and so what we typically do is we create a state that has the same name as the country, in this case New Zealand, and then within New Zealand we see the three cities. All right, that's the concept of a derived hierarchy. What I'm going to demonstrate next then is that there's another type of hierarchy that we call an explicit, and it'll be clearer when I demonstrate what it is. So on the sales territory region, I'm going to click the explicit hierarchies link and add an explicit hierarchy named regions. And I have one option here, and that is that all sales territories have to form part of the hierarchy. If I uncheck this, it's optional that my regions would be part of the hierarchy. So now that I've created this new hierarchy, I'm going to switch across to Explorer, manage the sales territory region entity, and then here on the hierarchies you'll see that there's the derived hierarchy for geography, but there's also the explicit for regions. Now explicit allows me to control the levels and the placement of members. Left-hand side shows all of the sales territories that I have, but what I'm going to do is create some additional members that are consolidated members. These are higher level members, and I'm going to create 4 of them. The first is North America, which represents the sales territory group. The second one that I'll create is Europe. And as I'm creating them, notice in the left pane that they appear and they are highlighted in bold. By the way, you'll notice that I'm receiving emails, and that's a good thing. We'll take a look at those in a minute. The last one is the country of United States. So with these 4 consolidated members, this is what I can do. I know that Canada gets dragged onto North America so that it becomes its parent, and United States the same thing. So both of these now report to North America. There's a shortcut. If I multi-select like Germany, France, United Kingdom, I can cut, select Europe, and paste. Of course, Australia and New Zealand can be cut and then pasted onto Pacific, and the last 5 are in fact the regions of the United States. So you can see that an explicit hierarchy allows you to customize the placement of your members and also define consolidated. Now in fairness, this is a deprecated feature. The way that you will need to do this moving forward is as a derived hierarchy, which says that you have to have an entity, which would be your sales territory group, an entity for sales territory country, and then your entity, as I already have, for sales territory region, and then create a derived hierarchy for them. All right, so that is the explicit hierarchy. Let me wrap up this demo that I'm going to refresh the staging tables that I have and just point out to you that for an explicit hierarchy you have staging tables that allow defining consolidated members and also relationship metadata. And in the next demonstration we're going to take a look at the integration process from these staging tables. Now, as I was presenting, you'll notice a couple of emails came in. The very first one is telling me that there was a validation issue. And this, in fact, was the City of New York. When I click on the link, it opens a new Master Data Manager Explorer page, filtering right down to that member. Of course, we now see that there's no error because we addressed it immediately. But this is the type of notification that you could then respond to, click on the link, understand the problem, fix it, and move on. The second email that came through was also a validation issue, and this was in relationship to the Christchurch, when I was attempting to not provide all details. All right, that completes the demonstration on enhancing a master data services model by using business rules and hierarchies. We now move on to the topic of managing your solutions, and permissions is a pretty important topic. So permissions allow different functionality, and also when it comes to browsing or managing master data, you can narrow it right down to specific members, even specific attributes within your entities. So that's the topic of permissions. There are some new enhancements in SQL Server 2016, especially in relationship to administrative and super user rights. The next topic is to do with integration. So how do we get data in and how do we get data out? And the topic of getting data into your solution is defined by entity-based staging. I've just shown you that there are these staging tables, and you're responsible for loading data into these tables, and then programmatically you can load and validate the data into your master data model. There's also version management, and you'll see that when a model is created, by default there's a version 1 with a status of open. Well, versioning can allow you to manage snapshots of your master data, and therefore a version can run through a life cycle of initially being open. It's open for business. You can go ahead and manage the master data. But at some point when you want to take that snapshot, administrators can lock the version, thereby only enabling changes to be made by those that have administrative rights. Business rules, any that are applied, must ensure that all versions or all members are valid. You cannot move forward to the commit phase if there are any failed validations. So at the stage that you have all business rules applied successfully, a commit takes place, and this commit is a one-way process. You can't go back. And a commit then locks that version in, and then you can create a copy, and this would become your new updatable version. And so this can support the release of batches of master data. Now, in fairness, none of my customers use this feature. They're actually quite happy to work within a single open version, so I would regard this very much as an optional capability. And now on the topic of getting data out of master data services, this is achieved through the topic of subscription views. And it's as simple as it sounds, that master data services will create views in the master data repository, and then processes like an integration services package could simply retrieve data from this view, and that is how the master data could be retrieved. Best way to talk about this is in the context of the demonstration that I already have. So at this stage what I'm going to do is switch back to the Master Data Manager. So I currently have 3 cities for New Zealand. But what I would like to do is have many more. So I have a script here that I'm going to open up in Management Studio, and let me demonstrate what's about to happen. In this CSV file, NZ cities, I have additional New Zealand cities, and I don't want to type them in as a human process. I would like to automate this, and so this is how I can achieve it. Let me just show you that this CSV file defines a number of other New Zealand cities in terms of name, postal code, and IP address locator. The intention of this script then is, by using the Master Data Services database, I'm going to create a temporary table to store the CSV data, and here's a bulk insert from the CSV. Here I am querying that temporary table, and we can see that there are 12 new cities and all of their values. Next, I insert them into that staging table. but there's some additional data that I'm going to insert. Specifically, I'm also going to put a batch tag. Now that means that I could have lots of data in the staging table, but I could target just a subset by a tag. This is what the data looks like in the staging table. And if you look at the documentation, specifically, the import type of one is that you're adding a new member. Here's the batch tag of New Zealand, and then the code is null because this is an auto-generate entity. The name, state, province, postal code, and IP address locator attributes are defined here. Let me just clean up by removing that temporary table, and then here is the process of initiating the staging, and specifically for any records that are for the NZ import batch tag. Now that the data has been staged, I can programmatically validate the data by calling this stored procedure. So what I've automated through this script is the loading of new members into an entity. There's nothing to stop any workflow like an integration services control flow from executing a script like this and then supporting the synchronization of master data between operational systems and your MDS repository. Now when I switch across to Excel and I refresh my query for data, I see that those New Zealand values are being loaded. But note here a validation failure that one of the cities has an invalid IP address. So it didn't pass validation. I will get an email in a matter of seconds to notify me of this, but let me fix up and clean that right away. So that's how we can stage data into master data services. The next topic then will be to work with the version management. As I've mentioned, this is an optional process, and notice here that the version 1 has a status of open. What we're going to do then is take this and lock it. And remember that by locking it, it means that only administrators may now work within this model. In fact, if we come to Excel, you'll notice here the status for these members is unchanged. If I refresh this, well, I show the Explorer and reconnect. Hold on. Well, I can see that it's locked here. Oh, of course, I'm an administrator, so at locked is not locked to me, but for a non-administrator, they would be getting a read-only status here. All right, now that it's locked, we move on to validating the version. Remember that all business rules must have produced valid results, and we see that's the result here. Now I can commit. This is the one-way process. There's a bug here. Just reload the page. And now we've moved to committed. So if I return to Excel and I refresh, we now see this data is read-only, and the model remains locked. And that's now a snapshot in time, and it provides a consistent set of master data. What you're likely to do at this stage, and I like this approach of adding some flags, and let me describe what these flags do in demonstration. The first is a flag named released with a description of released to any subscriber. And a subscriber could be like an integration services package. Released to subscribers. Save. And a second one which is historic. And this would be historic data not for subscribers. Now when I manage the versions, this committed version is going to be provided the flag of released. Now, you might see the pattern that perhaps every financial year I might release a new snapshot, and I would always ensure that the current snapshot for use would have the released flag and the older ones would have the historic flag. The last thing here is to enable the ongoing management of master data is to copy and create a whole new version. I'm just going to call this version number 2, and this has a status of open. What that means now in Excel is that if I refresh, in fact I will need to reconnect, we have a committed version which people might query, or for managing they'll switch to version 2 which is open. By the way, some more emails showed up. Here's the validation issue, but also another email is about to arrive that tells me that some status changes in the version management have taken place, and so administrators are automatically notified of those changes. You'll see this come through in a moment. All right, so that's the version management. Last topic on getting the master data out of the model is achieved by the integration management role. So in this function, there are two areas. You can import data and you can create subscription views. By the way, what you see here is the batch that uploaded the 12 New Zealand cities. And I could come in here and clear this and clean up the history, but really my focus is to create some subscription views to allow some integration services packages to retrieve master data. I'm going to create 5 of them. The first will be geography_country region. So I'm going to expose in this subscription view by, and this is important, by version flag, only by what is a released, go and give me the entity that is the country region. Just give me all of the leaf members, but if you have different transaction logging, you could also query history and type 2 changes, which your integration services package could make sense of. That's one view. Let me create one for state province. Again, using version flag released. Next, create one for city. And next, geography itself. So this time, I won't use an entity as the source. I'll use a derived hierarchy, which is the geography hierarchy, and I'll bring in 3 derived levels. And then lastly, regions. Again, for the version flag released, this time for the entity that is the sales territory region, and I'll bring in explicit levels, all 3 of them. So I've just created 5 subscription views, but take a look here. When I switch across to Management Studio, they are SQL Server views. And so now when I query the subscription view for regions, I'm not sure why this is taking so long. It's something to do with my VM, not SQL Server. You'll get an instantaneous result. But basically what you'll see is all of the details broken into the structure of level 0, 1, and 2. Here we have level 0 gives us the groups, level 1 gives us countries, level 3, and note the ragged nature gives us the regions. All right, by the way, email had just come through, and the email here was notifying that there'd been some version status changes. All right, so now that the subscription views are in place, I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio, and the first package that I want to show you is the DIM sales territory. And DIM sales territory is designed to load in master data, update an audit log, and then process the salesperson dimension in the analysis services cube. Let's take a look at the data flow. As its source, it is using that subscription view. And then the data flow will make fixes and changes and determine new and changed sales territories. So let's just go ahead and run this, noting that I have data viewers in place so we can look at the changes that flow through. And the execution of this package results in just one new sales territory region being added, which is New Zealand, to the Pacific group. We see that it's processing the dimension. We have success. So if I switch to the salesperson dimension and I reconnect, there we see New Zealand flowing through from the master data into the data warehouse and then through to the dimension of a cube. Lastly, DIM geography. So same flow, but in the data flow here, it's sourcing from the lowest level. Here it is bringing in from the subscription view for cities, all of the cities. It then uses lookups to bring in state, province, country, region, sales territory, performs necessary data conversions. By the way, the code and name attributes are nvarchart 250, so you may need to cast them as appropriate, and then it determines new and changes and applies them. Let's execute and see what flows through. All right, so two sets. Let's focus on this one first that's showing me that New York has been updated, and of course we had fixed its IP address. And then many changes for the cities in the state of Washington. Remember that Washington was in the wrong sales territory region. By changing it, it meant an update to all existing cities. Lastly, we see all of the New Zealand cities being added as new cities into the geography dimension table at AdventureWorks. And then we see that the dimension is processed. So now, browsing the reseller dimension geography hierarchy, we'll see that New Zealand now appears, and the cities can be then used for analysis within the cube. All right. That concludes the end-to-end demonstrations on Master Data Services. I'm going to wrap up with a very quick summary. It's a product delivered with SQL Server 2016 for master data management, designed to deliver credible, consistent data with user-centric data governance, and supported in the enterprise and developer editions of SQL Server 2016. As I've just demonstrated, the methodology is creating models, entities, attributes, enforcing integrity through business rules, defining hierarchies, importing and exporting through staging tables and subscription views. Permissions can be defined at very granular levels to control who can see or action against your data, and there's also model versioning. There are numerous opportunities and strengths. I will not read through them at this stage, but I did mention them during the demonstrations. I want to make a quick summary of what's new in 2016 with focus areas of security and admin, performance and scale, and model management. This is in fact a topic that I'll be talking about and demoing at the summit in October. So improvements to the user interfaces, improvements to security, improvements to performance with data compression and custom indexes, attribute filters, improved business rules including T-SQL logic extensions, many-to-many relationships, change sets to support workflows of approval, merge conflict detection and resolution, and entity sync to support master data hubs. There are a number of resources here. You can access this presentation from the 24 Hours of PASS site. I'll make a quick mention. There are a couple of hands-on labs that you can use through Microsoft's TechNet Virtual Labs. And if you search on SQL Server 2016 Master Data Services, you have a VM and labs to work through. I'm now ready to wrap up with any final questions.
Great. Thank you, Peter. See, I just had a question come in, and it says, can MDS integrate with an ERP which itself has master data requirements and controls?
So the integration is up to you. With staging tables, as I've demonstrated, you can load whatever data from whatever system you want in there, and then you can integrate with Master Data Services, and then other systems can retrieve Master Data Services data and do what they would like with it through subscription views. So there's actually no limit except your imagination on what you can achieve with import-export scenarios.
Okay, very good. Also, I noticed during one of your part of your demo, you said that if you're not an administrator, you won't see this locked down, or it will be locked down and you can't change that. What type of administrator is that? Is that an MDS administrator, or how is that handled?
Okay, so there are administrators. We literally have 1 minute, but there are model administrators, instance administrators, and entity administrators. You need to be a model administrator to be able to manage master data in a locked version.
Okay, very good. And I think that's going to wrap it up for the questions. Let's move on to the next slide here. And because we're at the end of the hour, and there's one more session left of 24 Hours of PASS, that is a crash course in BIML with Tim Mitchell. So please head on over to there, and don't forget to fill out your evaluations. And thank you for attending this 24 Hours of PASS session. And thank you, Peter, for giving us this great presentation.
You're more than welcome. Thank you, Rick, and all the best, guys, with your MDS adventures.
And we'll see you at the summit.